Nature absolutely thrives in diversity, and I think that we humans, we sometimes forget that we're a part of nature and that we also thrive in diversity. And that's what I mean by we're all individuals and we all have something different to give, whether you're a chief scientist or a spearfisher or whatever you are. There's something that we can bring to the picture. Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody to the Sea Has Many Voices, and I'm so happy to be here with Kimi or Kim?
Kimi. Most people call me,
Kimi Werner, the renowned freediver, sustainability visionary, truth seeker, extraordinaire. And we just spoke about a lot of things that you really got me fascinated by, but there was a couple of things you said that really caught my attention, and they related to the fact that I think you and I intrinsically share this notion that we're marine mammals, I think.
Yeah.
And there's actually science around it, which you're probably aware of. Have you heard of the community in Mossel Bay, South Africa? You heard about that work?
No.
They found this cave overlooking the ocean in Mossel Bay, South Africa, and they started digging, and they dug back 200,000 years to the point when the cave was first inhabited. And they think it was it was the savior of Homo sapiens. It was during a natural climate shift in Africa where the interior became very hot and wasn't working for the Homo sapiens. So this group of around 1,000 to 2,000 moved to the coastline, and that's the first piece of archaeological, anthropological, physical anthropological evidence we have of humans living along the coastline and middens. So it's when can you imagine the first day? Because we would have been living interior, right? And the first day they made their way to the coastline, pushed their way through the bushes, and saw this immense body of water. They probably thought it was fresh water at first. And then they went down and discovered there was this food, that they could gather in the intertidal zone. High quality food, it turned out. Of course, they didn't know that for generations. And also a great way to get away from predators. After being chased by lions your whole life.
Yeah.
Finally, you got a place where, okay, everybody in the water. And I think it's probably where we began to, not me, the anthropologists that have studied this say that it's where we began to really work out time, because we would have looked for the king tides, because the king tides would have pulled the ocean down significantly to really rich, protein-rich beds of mussels and whatnot. So that's when the clock starts ticking anyway, in the evidence for the physical anthropologists of humans interacting with the ocean, and there's other stories which we can talk about if you're interested sometime. It doesn't appear that they were diving there, because you can look at the inner ear bones of people, and yours and mine would be quite occluded from all the time we spent in the water. And the ear bones of the people that lived there were not occluded, so they didn't do a lot of diving. They probably waded out and picked things up. The first place that we find occluded ears is in Korea, actually. The people that...
Jeju.
I can't remember their names. It's the people that went from Korea over to Japan in reed boats of some sort. Then they made their way down into the Pacific. And those people had occluded eardrums, so they were the ones that probably, and that's 50,000 years ago or so. So I don't think that the ocean is an unnatural place for us. I think it's a natural place for us. And you said a couple things about it that made me think of animals in the ocean. Like you talked about a bubble stream that you saw, which reminded you of your father. And then you talked about the physicality of interacting with animals. And also, congratulations, you're expecting a child. Have you ever had, have you been in the water recently?
I have, yeah.
Do you see dolphins very often?
I haven't seen dolphins since being pregnant, so that is something I look forward to. But yeah.
I studied dolphins for 20 years in New Zealand, and we were able to be, part of my study was well, I didn't do it, but I happened to be there to document it, the introduction of swim with dolphin programs. You know, the commercial operators came in and people started paying to swim with the dolphins. And it was interesting to watch the habituation of dolphins to people. That was part of my research. But one thing that I noticed is they were fascinated by pregnant women.
That's what everyone says, yeah.
Absolutely. Anytime a pregnant woman got in the water, they were all right over to her, because they have the sonar and they have the location. And there was even one woman who didn't know she was pregnant. And as she got out of the water and we said, "Are you pregnant?" She said, "No." And we said, "Well, the dolphins say you are." And she called up a week later and said that she was only a couple of days into her. So they have, you just sounded like a dolphin to me, the way you were describing the ocean out there, you know, your sense of it. Do you have any other experiences? I'd love to hear any other experiences you've had. I know our listeners would too, in the ocean, with dolphins or sharks, or just to help. Let's open the window up for them a little bit about what's out there, because most people just see this opaque surface, and you have had the privilege and the ability to go down and see things. What's happened out there that comes to mind?
Oh man, when it comes to animal interactions, I've definitely had a handful of experiences with very curious, playful dolphins, for sure, right here in Hawaii. Probably one of my first interactions was one of the best, because this lone dolphin just literally swam by me with a leaf and dropped it right in front of me, kind of like teasing me with it. And when I went to grab the leaf, and it came back and like stole it from me right before.
That's what they do.
Yeah, before I could get it.
You know about that? That's a documented play behavior. Yeah.
And it was just insane. Like, and
he's playing with you.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a really neat experience, because in the process of him just teasing me with the leaf and stealing it.
That it'll be a piece of seaweed, and they'll take it, and they're so good at like hooking it on their fluke. You know? They'll just have it on their fluke, and they'll swim off with it, and then someone will try to get it, and they'll pull it away, then they'll let it go,
exactly.
Pass it on to somebody else, and then that next person, and then they just pass it around like a football.
And so that was a really, really neat one.
That is a neat one. I've never heard about that. I've never heard anybody play
one
golf.
Of my most recent animal interactions, I guess, was just last November in Norway. We were in the Arctic, and there was
keep talking about these cold places you go.
Yeah, it was really cold. I was freezing in this one, and we had like 3 or 4 hours of sunlight. The sun was always, and so we were just like shivering already. But there was a pod of orcas coming towards us, and I was so excited to see them. And then they just kind of changed course, and so I remember thinking, oh, I guess they're not interested in us, because they know that we're here. And they went away, and so I was just like, oh well, they're floating. And then all of a sudden I just saw these birds start to form into like a big group in the sky, like in the distance. And then I saw the birds started to dive, and I'm like, well, that's where the orcas went, obviously. Like, the birds are, that means, as a fisherman, that means that the birds see bait fish that are being pushed to the surface, and so they're diving down to get the bait fish. But that means that something bigger is pushing the bait fish up to the surface, and so that just told me that that's what the orcas were doing. And so I was just watching, floating and watching it all from a distance, and then I just saw the bird pile in the sky start to move in our direction. and it just happened so fast. Wow. Like, where the birds started coming our direction, that boil started coming in our direction, and all of a sudden there were just dorsal fins just whoosh, 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 so fast I couldn't even see the actual animals. Like, you could just see these like huge, like 3 foot tall, like dorsal fins just zooming by, and I was like, am I gonna get run over? But they were just so precise and so fast. And then everything just went quiet, like almost too quiet, absolutely quiet. And I just remember like looking down into that dark water and seeing just glitter of scales, you know. But I couldn't, I mean, it happened so fast I couldn't even see them feeding or the action, but I just saw the aftermath, which was just scales. And I didn't see a single orca after all that happened. But all of a sudden, this bubble, this one lone bubble, just like from the depths, just started coming up and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as it did. And it came right up to where I was floating. And it came and it just popped right on the surface. And when it popped, there was a herring. Like, actually, so what it was a herring where the air had been escaping it. It was kind of snapped like a pencil, and it was floating up with its air bladder, and then it popped, and it was just like this one dead herring, and it was just like the eeriest thing, and then so I just decided, okay, I'm just gonna take a dive. So I took a breath, took a dive right to where that bubble came from, and went down to the darkness, and then I just saw what was left of the bait ball, and it was just like this group of herring that I swear I could almost see them trembling. I really felt like I could just see them trembling at me, and I even looked at them, I almost felt bad, but I was just like,
these are the beautiful sounds of Hawaii around us, dogs and chickens.
Yeah.
So the herring were trembling.
Yeah, so I saw this like trembling little leftover group of herring, and
how many were left?
I mean, it was not a very big.
Yeah. And it was the orca that ate them all?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think most of them probably just dispersed or went lower or whatnot, but I remember seeing them and being like, okay, and as I backed up, and I started going back up, then this big bull orca just came vertically up with me.
Oh my God.
And I was just like in awe. I mean, it was big, and we just came up to the surface together, and as soon as we came up, he just very precisely grabbed that little herring and went back down. And that was it. But that was insane.
That's
like,
insane.
I broke the surface, and I just started laughing like in hysteria, like a crazy woman, because I just could not believe what had just happened.
What a privilege to see that, to be part of that.
That was really something for sure.
I was in a bait ball once off of Cocos, and one of the cameramen didn't notice it, but one of the fish swam into his BC. You know how they do that?
Wow.
The fish, these are sharks coming after the bait ball, and boy, you got to get the fish out of your BC, because
Totally.
the sharks they'll know there's a fish there, you know. And it's like, I got the cameraman, and I ripped his BC open and got the fish out of his BC because the fish was in there trembling,
Totally,
trying to hide. But boy, with sharks anyway, I've seen them. They really, you'll have a bait ball that'll be 2 meters, 2 or 3 meters across and around, and after a half hour, 20 minutes, it's gone. They're just sharks and dolphins just come and just like everybody gets eaten.
Yeah.
Until you get a trembling little group down there. That's a great description. Wow.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's really authentic.
Yeah. I remember. I also had the privilege of diving Papahanaumokuakea, which is as you know, but it's like our nation's largest marine or monument, period, I believe, which is also, I've had some...
The Northwest Hawaiian Islands.
The Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, yes, and that's where, I think that was my first time really diving this super, like, apex predator heavy ecosystem, and understanding just how quickly things can just get vaporized like that,
Just
from
tiger
the
sharks?
giant trevally, Galapagos sharks, tiger sharks, and that was a really neat opportunity for me, and another kind of cool part of my, like, I guess, evolution of learning my connection to the ocean and this planet, was meeting my brother, who happens to be the chief scientist of the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands.
Oh, what's his name?
His name is Randy Kosaki.
Oh, I know him.
Yeah,
Okay.
I assume that you guys would, because he's I mean, you both seem so similar in the way that you're just these very big picture thinkers and visionaries, and especially with your like understanding of the importance, you know, of, or your leadership of the importance when it comes to big marine protected areas being of the utmost importance right now. And so he oversees the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, and that was a really neat part of my life too. My boyfriend Justin and I made a little film about it, but yeah, I always I only met him a little more than a decade ago, because actually my mom, she had gotten pregnant when she was 17 years old, and that was long before I came along. But at the time, she didn't really come from a very good or supportive family at all. So immediately she was kicked out of school. First of all, you weren't allowed to go to school and be pregnant as a girl. And she was also kicked out of the house. Is that the goose?
I know, somebody's the sounds of nature at Porter Turnbull.
I gotta go wrangle the goose.
We're gonna get
That
the goose.
is so funny.
So yeah.
But yeah, no, and so once she got pregnant, she was kicked out of school. She was kicked out of her own home. You know, just was not at all supported whatsoever. And she ended up being told, like, you know, after you have this baby, then you can move back into the house, because right now you're just a bad example for the younger children. We don't want them to see you pregnant. You're a bad example. So once you have the baby, then you can come back, but then we're going to raise it as your brother. And my mom was just like not into that, and she's like, I want my baby to, number one, have a much better life than this. Right. And no, he's my son, he's not my brother. And so she decided at that age to give him up for adoption at birth. And so that's Randy. And so she gave her baby up for adoption at birth, and way later in life, at 36, you know, had me and told me this whole story of how I have a brother out there somewhere, a half brother out there somewhere, and it was always my dream to find this person, and I didn't. We weren't able to, but he actually, a little over 10 years ago, ended up finding us, and so he had to hire private investigators and whatnot, and then they reached out to my mom, and before I knew it, I was Googling this name, Randall Kosaki, and find out that he's one of the top etiologists and just this big time marine conservationist.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah,
such a great guy, and I'll never forget being so in awe of him, because I'm just reading about all these fish that he discovered, or species of coral, or just the scientific justification that he's written to help protect and expand these areas. And so I was just immediately his biggest fan, and just like, I can't believe this guy is my brother. And especially when I hear some of his interviews, when they say, what was your favorite part of your last expedition, and instead of even just saying, discovering this fish or that fish, he'd say, the minute I could take off all my tech gear and go freediving. And I was like, what? But I was almost kind of afraid that when I met him, that he might see me as like the enemy or something. Like, I'm this girl who I kill fish and that's what I do, and I just was afraid that he might not appreciate my life path. And it was just so awesome that wasn't the case at all. And as soon as we met, he'll always describe it as we're just like two sides of the same coin.
That's how I saw it.
Exactly.
When you described it, I immediately said, same coin, yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people, again, who
you gotta be practical in life.
Exactly.
A lot of people aren't practical.
Yeah, who don't necessarily connect the dots, who might consider themselves proclaimed environmentalists or conservationists and use buzzwords like that, but really have no true connection or practicality, of this kind of stuff. I think try and put everyone into separate boxes. Whereas with Randy and I, it's not the case at all. And it's just so neat to me that we're brother and sister, and we can learn so much from each other, and and enjoy so much of the ocean together.
I'm going to interview Randy for the show.
Please do. Yeah,
do
he's a big fan of you for sure.
Well, I'm a big fan of his. Please let him know that. And that's what a wonderful grounding to hear. And
his old boss Aulani worked with you as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I hired Aulani at CI before I left. Yeah, she was the. I can't remember what she was doing before she came to CI, but she was there with him. Yeah. Kimi, is there anything that you'd like to communicate? I mean, we're going to send people to your website. We're trying to build our network through the Sea Has Many Voices, and now thank you for joining that network. You're one of some 20-odd people that have joined as guests. Is there any, I always like to give guests the opportunity to say anything they want about anything at all.
Yeah, I guess my main takeaway from this conversation, first of all, I love the title, The Sea Has Many Voices, because I do think that, that my main takeaway from the questions you asked me of, what can we do or whatnot is, it's diversity is the answer, is that nature absolutely thrives in diversity. And I think that we humans, we sometimes forget that we're a part of nature and that we also thrive in diversity. And that's what I mean by we're all individuals and we all have something different to give, whether you're a chief scientist or a spearfisher or whatever you are. There's something that we can bring to the picture. Yeah, and even when you talk about indigenous wisdom, I think that's one thing that indigenous people know so well is like when it comes to even the Hawaiians, it's like one thing that they believe is that these plants, these animals, that's their ancestors, that's their gods. It's not just something you can't just sell that. You wouldn't go sell your grandma, right? And so it changes things when you have that connection. And so I think they knew early on that you would never. Because I think one of the biggest problems is that we sell, this is like one of the most biodiverse places in the world, if it's not the most, and yet we'll sell this diversity for a single commodity for profits. And I think anytime that you do that, you're just making a crazy mistake, and that's just not the way that nature's intended.
Wow. Yeah, that's
and I think it's the same way with people in life.
That's a really good point. Something I would say this is the second time during the show where someone has put out a pearl of real sharp wisdom that you're right. Darwinian evolution on this planet depends on diversity, and diversity is a function of habitat and time. The most diverse places on the planet are places where there's been life for a very long time, and there's lots of niches. That's why Hawaii's got a lot of niches, and in Indonesia, Malaysia has trenches and mountains and everything. And that in our society today, we're in need of diversity, and it's robustness. It provides resilience, and different approaches and different ways of thinking are what we need in the world today. I totally agree with that, and you're right. That's exactly what the show is about.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me. That's why we're doing this, and with such a broad spectrum. And you've been a fantastic guest, and can I ask you to maybe come back on the show another time?
Definitely.
Maybe we can go down on the beach one day and walk along, get Porter and Evie. I want you to meet Evie, by the way, he's the first Indigenous climate adaptation scholar.
Wonderful.
He's going to College of the Atlantic, and it's a new program to take students from Indigenous communities that are severely impacted by climate change and give them a degree in human ecology, so that they can, help go home and help deal with the problem.
I think I know we're closing, but I think that's just the most amazing thing, and I do think that that's such a key to solving so many of the issues. And that's one thing I see happening a lot also in Palau, is that a lot of the scientists and the government leaders who are now doing this environmental work, the wonderful thing too is that they're Palauan, and so they also have this true connection, to their resources, and then they can go get educated and learn this science, but come back and just apply it.
It's interesting you should say that, because Evie and I were just at the Pew Fellows meeting over in Hilo, I'm a former Pew Fellow, and he came with me as a young absorber of information. And there was a couple guys from Palau and from FS Federated States of Micronesia, and they were talking about the loss of culture and the loss of language. People are learning the ability to speak the local language is being lost by, which really surprised me. And I asked Evie about Kiribati, which place I've worked a lot, and I said, are people not learning how to speak? And he went, no way. He said, it's the other way around there, that the language is very, very robust.
Good.
And, but it is a problem. Cultures, languages are endangered just like species are. And to your point, we need to maintain that diversity in order for us to continue to survive on this planet, because we need to draw on every resource that we have, every mind that we have, every approach that we have. And people look up to you, Kimi, and thank you for living the life that you live, because you are changing lives.
Thank you.
And I'm convinced that you're changing the course of humanity on this planet in your own way.
I completely agree that, that's the one thing we don't look at is ethnocide and how that affects our earth and everything too. Is that if these beautiful indigenous cultures are going to become extinct, like that's all related so much to the environment. Like it just there's no space between that, and I think we forget that. Like we are so a part of nature that we can't be losing that.
Yeah, I said there were two things that came in the show. That the one that you just said was a real epiphany for me, in that I understand it totally, but I'd never heard somebody worded that way. The other one was a woman, her name is Marga Solar. She's a Spanish scientist who was in science diplomacy. And she and I discussed the role of women in leadership roles and how, what's the difference? You know, I'm a big supporter of equality in all sectors, and what do women bring to the table? And we unpacked that during her interview, and it's really, women think more about the future, so they are going to be more caring about what happens around you, probably much more conflict averse, and that whole paradigm needs to be, woven into our society. And your point is again the second one, which is one that I kind of knew, but I had never had anybody put it in such a concise way, that the diversity of people, thinking, cultures, language, in a Darwinian sense. You got me with the science there, because Darwinian evolution encourages that for our survival. And so thank you again for all you do. Thanks for the time on this. Is it Sunday, Monday, or Sunday morning at our mutual good friend Porter Turnbull's place, and he's going to be on the show next. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll have you back.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.